Welcome to the DraftKings wide receiver analysis for Week 5. I'm Jason Gilbo, Gilbo11. With me is Justin Elick at Big Italy 42. Looking at cash, GPP, and value wideouts for this week. Pretty interesting group here. Obviously, we don't kind of go into the names that we need to talk about. I'm sure you felt probably a little redundant talking about Antonio Brown on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I mean, I got kind of sick of it, and I mean, by really before this season, I shouldn't have to tell you to play Antonio Brown. If you don't know that, then you probably aren't doing too well in any sort of fantasy football anyway. But yeah, this week I kind of went with more balanced guys. Obviously, Antonio Brown is there. You got Julio Jones in a tough matchup. I'm not playing him outside of GPP, but Michael Crabtree's got the same price on both sites, $6,900. And I mean, he just seems like a real safe bet this week, a guy that's going to see a lot of ownership once again. And it's kind of surpassed Amari Cooper, in my mind at least, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, as far as the number one receiver for Oakland. 23 targets the last 2 weeks. He's caught 15 of those for 190 yards. Had 3 touchdowns last week, 4 total in the season. I think he's a safe option. Certainly aren't expecting he's going to get 3 touchdowns again, but I mean, he's got some phenomenal chemistry now with Derek Carr. And I mean, Derek Carr is hitting his spots. I mean, 2 of those touchdown passes in particular last week were just unbelievable, like perfect throws. So sub 7K, I just think it makes sense to lock him in if you're playing cash games because he's got a solid floor. He's got double-digit fantasy points in every game. You know, even if he doesn't find the end zone, you figure something in the realm of 7 for 80 is a pretty fair amount. And he's not a guy that's going to kill your lineups. And obviously, confidence riding high with him and Carr.
Yeah, I like him a lot this week. I think you look at the matchup, it sets up really well with everyone that's banged up in that secondary and done for the year. As you mentioned, Jason Verrett's out, who you made a personal note to me on Twitter, you know, making sure I knew about it.
Yeah, and I'm sure you already did, but I mean, that's the one guy that you always avoided, and I've taken my chances on against a couple of times and usually not done particularly well. But, I mean, we're pretty much out of cornerbacks that we need to just instantly avoid now. So fire away.
Yeah, no, you definitely can. Emmanuel Sanders, you talk about next at a similar price, 6,800. He's been another guy really consistent, developed a nice kind of relationship with Simeon, and it doesn't really matter. I don't think you say here, it doesn't matter if it's Lynch or Simeon. You know, Sanders will go out and get his.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Sanders last couple of weeks just been tremendous. John Brown somehow has the most targets in the NFL over the last 2 weeks after getting 16 last week. But Sanders, 13 targets each of the last 2 weeks, 9 for 117 and 2 in a tough matchup against Cincinnati, 8 for 88 and 1 against Tampa Bay. Not so tough of a matchup. But, I mean, this week, I haven't really seen reports of this or anything confirming it. But, you know, it seems to me that Emmanuel Sanders in this matchup, Broncos are going to score a ton of points, 26-point team total. If I'm the Falcons, I'm putting Desmond Trufant on Demaryius Thomas and leaving Emmanuel Sanders because, you know, Sanders for the most part is more involved in the short passing game. He's not the big downfield threat like Demaryius Thomas is. So I think it could open up just a huge game for Sanders. And I could be wrong in that. And maybe we'll see Trufant on him, but Trufant is definitely isn't unbeatable by any means. We've seen some guys, more so the big receivers like Mike Evans, have better games against him. But Sanders is elusive, and I mean, 13 targets a week for 2 weeks. He's obviously the focal point of that offense right now.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, a big play guy too. So, you know, one pass, I mean, he's a guy who can break it to the house. GPPs, you're looking at T.Y. Hilton at 7,400. Also, we'll kind of talk to Jordy Nelson, 7,900. You kind of bolded him as kind of another popular play that you didn't really need to explain a whole lot of just because we know how good he is.
Yeah, I mean, when he's healthy, I mean, he and Aaron Rodgers, arguably to me, I think they could be the number one duo in the league. I mean, it's obviously it's subjective, but I think that they're the best duo in the league.
I like them a lot. I mean, they're up there with a couple other guys, and I know you don't want to say their names because you're a Bengals fan.
I mean, I'll say it. Antonio Brown, but he's 2/3 of that duo. It's not a 50-50 split like Rodgers and Nelson. It's close to 50-50 at least. That one's 70-30.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Hilton, though, 7,400, you're looking at him in GPPs. He's another monster volume guy and will continue to be just because that, you know, basically the passing attack can always be there. And with the injury to Dante Moncrief, you know Hilton's going to get 10-plus again.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, double-digit targets in every game this year. And really has only had one big game. It was at 8 for 174 and a touchdown against San Diego. But I mean, that touchdown he scored to go ahead in that game was just unbelievable. I mean, it was something like a 15-yard pass across the middle. And I mean, that's the type of play that in most professions and most jobs, if you make a mistake so bad as to let him score there, you don't have a job anymore. But I mean, obviously a lot of that was just him being elusive, his speed. He's not a big guy by any means, but I mean, he's tough to break down. He's a tough cover because he's so fast. And, you know, one of the few guys that's not a big target, but is still a nice downfield threat.
Yeah, I mean, I look at him and I just think GPPs, it kind of screams him because I think there's a lot of guys in that range. It might cut into his ownership, and you know, the potential is there. Still a big team total for the Colts, so you got to imagine Hilton's going to be a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm not taking too much stock into the fact that the Bears kind of shut out the Lions last week, or shut them down at least, held them to 6 points on offense. Colts, huge volume passing attack, like you mentioned. So I think he's a safe option, and we know he's got multiple touchdown upside.
Yeah, definitely. Steve Smith, you talk about 5,300 and the price that never really seems to rise. Could see some Josh Norman this week, could not. Does that kind of hinge into why he's just GPP?
Yeah, that and the fact that, you know, I don't necessarily trust Joe Flacco and Steve Smith's 37. Not quite the doesn't get quite the separation that he once did, but I mean, he's the obvious number one target in that offense. I think Mike Wallace is a distant second, but 5,300 there against the Redskins, who, like I mentioned earlier, you know, one of the lesser defense in the league, 18th against the pass this year. Maybe he sees some Josh Norman, but I don't think he'd be seeing Josh Norman the entire game. But it's hard to say at this point. We saw Josh Norman, you know, just completely avoid Antonio Brown one week, and then he wants to shadow sometimes. So it's hard to peg what they're doing with Josh Norman other than paying him pretty much to stand around half the time. So I still think he's a decent option if he sees some Josh Norman. I mean, that price it's low enough that he's a low risk option, and I mean, he's going to see probably 8 to 12 targets in this one.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I mean, he's a guy who's been worked in the last couple of weeks. We know what he can do. It looks like he's healthy. I mean, he's shown off his speed that we know he's had. In terms of value wideouts, you're looking at two guys who are really taking advantage of injuries. I mean, Des Bryant likely out this week. Sammy Watkins we know out. But Bryce Butler here first.
Yeah, I mean, Butler, $500 above the minimum on DraftKings, and last week really in his first chance as I guess the number one. I mean, is Terrence Williams number one? There's not really a clear-cut number one, but increased role, I guess we'll say. Saw 9 targets, only caught 5 of them, 41 and a touchdown. But, I mean, had a second red zone look, just wasn't able to make the play there. So could have been a huge game for him. But at 3,500, I mean, if he goes 5 for 41 and a touchdown, again, I mean, he destroys that salary for you. So, you know, Bengals are above average team against the pass. But Dak Prescott looks really good. Even I, as a Bengals fan, am not delusional enough to think they're just going to shut this offense down. So Bryce Butler is going to get looks. You know, he's a pretty big target. So I think that at that price, I think he's a guy you take a shot on. I'd probably rather have him than Woods if assuming that Brian is out. But I think you're kind of splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think Woods, the only thing that I like more about Woods is I think the targets over the last 2 games has kind of been a safer route with him. But obviously we know Woods isn't really a big touchdown guy, which works well because, I mean, in terms of PPR, he can kind of fill that void and get you about 10 to 14 points. But a Rams defense, too, that really hasn't looked that great against wide receivers.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a big touchdown guy, and the Bills' offense aren't in general.
They're not a touchdown team in general.
No, they're a field goal. They're a please get us 3 points type of offense. So, you know, Woods, we kind of made fun of him a couple weeks ago, actually, talking about how he wasn't even a legitimate number 2. So this isn't to say that we all of a sudden, I don't know, maybe you think he's good now. I doubt it. But no. I definitely don't think he's good now. But by default, you got to throw the football to somebody. And he's now kind of by default the number one option there in that offense. And like you said, he's seeing a heavy amount of targets. He should see a good amount again here. Rams defense is a good one. Bills offense is not a good one. But like you said, if you're just looking for a floor, got to imagine he catches 5, 6, 7 passes in this one. I wouldn't in any way say he's likely to score a touchdown. Butler's definitely more likely to get one, but I think he definitely has a higher floor.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm definitely in agreement. I like those value plays quite a bit. That's going to wrap things up here with the wide receiver analysis for DraftKings. Be sure to head on over to dailyfantasycafe.com, check out our great tools and content.